It's Louise the Big Head Bookworm. Any cake? In the last video I offered you cake. There's still lots left if anybody would like some. And can I just say it's very nice, quite light for something that is so dense. Anyway, let's not talk about cake. We're here to talk about books. I'm here with more books that I have been reading recently. So I recently bought and then read straight away The Ashes of London by Andrew Taylor. So I read this mid-February and I'm recording this mid-March. So it was about a month ago that I read it. It is based in the Great Fire of London in 1666. As the city burns, the hunt for a killer begins. We follow two perspectives. The person that's trying to find the murderer, and a woman who is connected to it. So it's two perspectives, two storylines, and they converge, as you can imagine. And there we go. I picked it up because I was really in the mood for historical fiction at the time. I couldn't remember having read anything about the Great Fire of London or that was set in that period. And for that, the book was brilliant. You really got a feeling of the smell, the devastation, the confusion, how much it altered London. So it had, and the idea of rebuilding it, and all the pressure of what had happened, and all the displaced people, and the chaos and confusion. From that, the book was brilliant. It was so, it felt as though you were there. You felt as though you could smell it, you know, and taste it all the time. The grittiness of the ash, you know, and the fact that it would be in your mouth all the time and up your nose and in your ears and that kind of stuff. You really got a feeling of that. So as a period piece, as a piece of historical fiction, it was grand for that. And I couldn't remember reading anything, as I said, by that. The crime itself was multi-layered and I enjoyed it. I was about halfway through the book and I suddenly remembered I've read an Andrew Taylor before, which is never good when you're only halfway through the book and you suddenly realise it. And then I looked it up and I was like, oh yes, I have read, I thought it was The American Boy. The American Boy by Andrew Taylor. I can't remember the plot of it, but I know I read it. And the thing that lingered from me from reading that book was that the fact I felt it was quite a cold book. I felt as though I was quite distant from the action, and I felt exactly the same from this. So from a period where I felt like I could feel the ash on my face and in my hair, and I could feel that. The actual plot and the action, the two characters that we were involved with, the woman and the man, I felt one step removed from. They didn't live for me. I understood what was happening, I understood the motivation, I understood the plot completely, but something was missing. There was something missing. Whether or not it's just me and the novelist, me and Andrew, don't quite get it together. It could well just be that. It could just be that there's just an element of his writing I don't respond well to. It isn't fiery enough. See what I did there? Fire enough. It felt cold, which is wrong for a book like this. You shouldn't feel that, but I felt as though there was a distance between myself and I was interested in what happened. But if I'd got halfway through and somebody had said, oh, at the end of that book this and this happens, I'd have gone, oh right, okay, and just stopped reading it, which is wrong. But it's not a book that I would say don't read, because I suspect it is less about the book and more about just my taste in Andrew Taylor. And this time I'm hoping I remember that that's what happens with me and Andrew Taylor, and I don't buy another one of his books and get to the end of it and then go, oh, didn't I read The Ashes of London? So yes, So I read that. It was a good book. I'm really glad that I read something in that period, because it's given me a greater understanding of that. And it's also centred quite a lot about St Paul's Cathedral, which I am extremely fond of and enjoy visiting. And it makes me think, oh, I want to go back. And I haven't been for ages. So that was good. Let's go on to the next book. Was a non-fiction. It's called Midnight in Peking. It is set in Peking in 1937. It's a true crime book about who killed Pamela. It's about the expat community and all the different communities in Peking. Now, I don't know an awful lot about China. I certainly don't know. My Chinese history is just, to say thin is to kind of overplay it. So that was one of the things that drew me to it. It's quite a brutal crime, and I have to say it is told really, really well. It's not a long book, but it had a strong impact, and it felt like excellent kind of retelling of it. You didn't kind of really fall for any of the characters, because, or kind of, you sympathised-ish with it. There is a resolution, which I quite like with this as well, because I wonder whether there would be a resolution, and there kind of is. You kind of get an idea of what they think happened, which was good. I found it really, really gripping. But the thing I found the most gripping, the crime was interesting, but the thing I found most gripping was what was happening in Peking in 1937, what had been happening for all that time, and then what led into the Second World War. And it made me realise I've got an enormous hole in my understanding of world history, and it is stunningly fascinating. That just blew me away. So, superb. So I really enjoyed it and would highly recommend Midnight in Peking by Paul French. Completely change up the pace, as you do. I picked up Changeless by Gail Carriger. I read Soulless by Gail Carriger, the first in the Parasol Protectorate at the end of last year, and loved it. Steampunk set in London in the Victorian era, with werewolves and vampires and all sorts of ghouls, and it's just glorious, glorious. This is the second one. I can't tell you what happens in it because it's the second one in the series. It's a 5-book series. This is the second one. Somebody said to me, well, you might as well buy the third book because there's an enormous cliffhanger at the end of it. And oh my word, was I. And I loved Lord Macon in Soulless. I was just, he was mine. And at the end of this, I was like, so immediately I picked up Blameless, which is the third, because I just couldn't. I just couldn't. I had to know. And I found this very satisfying. I found this a very satisfactory third book. As a series, it just keeps on giving, doesn't it? It just keeps on giving it. So if you haven't picked up Soulless by Gail Carriger, please do, but treat yourself and get Changeless and get Blameless as well. So, glorious. It's what I needed, actually, after the kind of of the Ashes of London and the of Midnight in Peking. This was a complete palate cleanser and was just brilliant. So I am such a fan of Gail Carriger. So I've read 3 out of the 5 books now. I haven't read the next 2 because I know that I'll probably read them in the same as a gallop. Are they behind me? Where are they? Yes. So yes, they're there waiting for me. Last book that I shall say that I tell you about was I read Goldfinger. Oh, the temptation to sing that, but I won't because I care about you, BookTube. I provide cake and I don't sing at you. I just keep on giving, don't I? Goldfinger by Ian Fleming. This is the 7th. I was right. 007 novel. So it's James Bond. It's James Bond. It's spying. It's Goldfinger. Oh, I kind of shouldn't. I feel like some ways I feel like I shouldn't love it because it's so So, not misogynist, but sexist, yes. If you know that it is quite sexist. And there's one or two lines that James Bond said that you just go, wah. And I don't think it's said ironically, but I do think it's completely of its period, because it was written in the 1950s and 50s, like late 50s, 60s or 50s, I can't remember when it was. And I do think it was, yes, this is late 50s, early 60s, sorry. I do think it was completely of its period. And I'm very glad that, well, one hopes that the attitudes have changed. One wonders, but one hopes. They just suck me in, and I absolutely get gripped by it. And this one had so much peril in. I mean, really, I was like, complete. And I've watched the film I don't know how many times, and yet, and it is slightly different, but it, oh my word. And some of the characterizations, there's one bit towards the end where there's a group of villains all sat round, that kind of, you know, different types of villains, and the threat, the language is quite sparse, you know, it's quite sparsely written, and yet you visualise them so well, and it's just, the threat is really like, so that was grand, just great. So that was a high point for me, I'll be honest, it was a high point. And there we go, we will leave it there, BookTube. It's been great. I have read that's a bit of a variety, isn't it? Let me just pick up the 5 books that I have shown you. So historical fiction, true crime set in Peking in 1937, fantastic steampunk, and then a 1950s spy novel. Yes, that kind of says something about me. Good things, I hope. Good things, I hope. How have you been, lovely booktubers? How have you been? Have you had any nice books recently? What was the last book that you felt like you shouldn't enjoy? Have you had that where you've read it and you thought, I shouldn't enjoy this book? There's things that's kind of not sitting comfortably, and yet I'm drawn in. That's me and Ian Fleming. It really is. I just think I completely recommend them to everybody, and then at the same time I'm like, should I have recommended them? But yeah, I do. Anyway, BookTube, it's been lovely as always. Let's do this again. Bye.